Most leaders simply assume the answers to these questions and operate on those assumptions. The consequence of not interrogating wants, fears, and skills, however, is ignorance and confusion, two incredibly damaging elements for leading an organization. Leaders who make decisions without a clear sense of what they actually want pass that ambiguity on down the line. And the further this goes, the greater the damage to the cohesion of the organization. Leaders who have not identified clearly the fears that may be driving their perspectives and decisions begin shaping the organizational culture around anxiety and avoiding catastrophe. And unless anxiety and avoiding catastrophe is your mission, this will lead an organization astray from its stated purpose. Perhaps most damaging, if a leader isn't clear on what they are good at, they can wreak havoc in areas of incompetence, marginalize capable people, and completely divert attentions away from effective work. So while these questions can feel personally invasive, they are actually critical to your leadership and to the health of your organization. Now, there are two principles for how we ask these questions. The first principle is that asking these questions regularly and diligently is as important as answering them. The encouragement here is to persist in asking these questions over and over again in various circumstances and contexts to make sure that you understand what the real answer is. This repetition is also to ensure that you keep up with the inquiry, because how you answer these questions may actually change over time. The second principle is that the effectiveness of these questions is equal to the level of honesty you're willing to have in asking and answering them. Most money spent on leadership development programs is wasted simply because the people who engage with these activities are not honest. Please know, this is not a test you have to pass or a mere exercise you can forget about. These questions are an interrogation of reality. Be committed to getting to the truth of the matter. These questions are really just tools for mining the depths of your soul, your psyche, the stuff that makes you behave the way you do. And it is ultimately your behavior that makes or breaks your leadership. So pledge yourself to truly understanding your wants, your fears, and your skills. I once consulted with two organizations who were already working together and were considering the possibility of joining together as one organization. The vision of this merger made absolute sense. Both organizations had similar and compatible missions. They had a long-standing relationship, and the skill sets in each respective organization were incredibly compatible and mutually beneficial. The strengths that one brought to the table were commensurate with the weaknesses of the other. In short, they answered question 3 really well. What are they actually good at? They had both identified their strengths and weaknesses, and as a result, our discussions were filled with excitement at the possibilities of what could come about as a result of the two joining forces. After hours of discussions and mutually agreeing to the benefits of this move to our hopes and dreams, we simply could not cut a deal. Now, while these kinds of negotiations are always complicated, a main reason why we couldn't come together is that while the two leadership teams clearly stated that they wanted to accomplish this joint mission together, the reality is that the leaders of one of the organizations were actually afraid and wanted something other than what they had verbalized in our talks. It became clear the leaders of one side wanted to protect their investment, the integrity of their brand, and the positions of their leaders. A merger on paper was good for their mission, but a threat to their wants and an exacerbation of their fears. While they stated that they were willing to make sacrifices for this greater vision, the reality is that they were afraid of what they would lose. And they had a more primal want motivating and informing their discussion points in our conversations. How do I know this? Simple. Once we started talking about the logistics of how all this would work, the topics they brought up and the questions they asked began to revolve around the protection of their organization, their leaders, their brand, and their financial investment. Rather than working together around the stated want that brought the two organizations together in the first place, the conversation shifted to a different want. One side truly wanted a merger. The other side actually wanted an acquisition. Now, there is nothing wrong with wanting to protect the integrity of your brand, your investment. There is nothing wrong even with wanting to acquire another organization. It happens all the time. And there is certainly nothing wrong with strategizing how you move forward in talks. These things are always filled with certain delicacies. There is something, however, terribly wasteful and damaging to relationship by not being honest with what you really want. The negotiations would have been far more productive if this organization had simply stated up front that they wanted to be the name and the controllers and to hold the reins of power. Think of how much time, energy, effort, and money could have been saved if they simply stated up front that they were actually looking to negotiate not a merger, but an acquisition. The end result was an increase in mistrust between the two organizations and the needed assistance of lawyers, which, of course, increases costs, both in time and money. Resources that could have been spent more beneficially elsewhere. What you want, what you fear, and what are you actually good at are the three most important questions any leader needs to ask and address. Principle 1, asking these questions persistently and diligently is as important as answering them. Principle number 2, be honest with yourself and with others. Let's start with question number 1. What do you want?